very, very good evening and a warm welcome to all of you to AIOC 2021, the 79th virtual conference. I'm your hall coordinator, MOC Himay, and I would like to welcome Dr. Devendra Maheshwari. And Dr. Maheshwari, a warm welcome. And the podium is all yours. This is your virtual space. Sir, can you please go ahead?
Thank you. Thank you very much. So good evening, respected faculty and colleague. First of all, I would like to thank AIOS Scientific Committee for giving this opportunity. And a special thanks to Dr. Partha and Dr. Amit. We welcome all of you for video-assisted instruction course. We will go through the pre-op and post-operative management of trabeculectomy. We would like to introduce our panel, our galaxy of speakers who are all having the vast experience of surgical management in glaucoma. So Dr. R. Ramakrishnan, Dr. Mohiddin Abdul Qadir, Dr. Sarmila, Dr. Ravindra, myself, Dr. Devendra. So without delay of time, I would like to again check Dr. Deepak Edward is there or not. Once more call for Dr. Deepak. I think Dr. Deepak is not with us, so I would like to request Dr. R.K. sir. Dr. R.K. sir, I feel very fortunate to get a chance to introduce my mentor, Dr. R.K. sir. He has no need for any introduction. He is a world-renowned glaucoma person, a man of simplicity and virtue, and an ocean of knowledge. And he is an amazing teacher, par excellence surgeon, and he is the greatest teacher to all of us. He has trained more than 100 long-term fellows and 400 short-term fellows. He has held various prestigious posts in GSI and even AIOS, and he has won the numerous prestigious awards. So I think there's a long list to tell his all awards and prestigious awards and posts. So I would request Dr. R.K. sir to share his lifetime experience on trabeculectomy. Over to you, sir. Dr. R.K. sir.
Is it visible?
Yes, sir. Your screen is visible now.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, Devendra. Thank you very much. Thank AIOS for giving us this opportunity, and also thank Devendra. And also I have to thank my colleagues also for this wonderful instruction course. The topic what Devendra has given is battle well prepared is half won. So definitely it is true, especially for glaucoma filtering surgery, because we have to do a lot of pre-operative workup to make the filter to work in the post-operative period and also lifelong. And of course, there are so many glaucoma surgery have been advocated in the last 2-3 decades. And of course, now the MIGS and other procedures have come so much in the field. But still, the trabeculectomy, which was introduced in the year 1961, is the gold standard in many of the cases of glaucoma. And of course, it's not only that, because the ease with which we can do this procedure and also economical, and with suppose you have done a good surgery, it will definitely the success rate is very good. Of course, a perfect filtering blood, how it will look like, it should look like it should be a diffuse, not localized one, and it should be a translucent with the microcystic changes and relatively avascular with a good control of intraocular pressure. And what else? There are so many hurdles for achieving this perfect filtering blood. One is the pre-operatively, then of course intraoperatively. So equally, the surgery is equally important, and of course the post-operative management also equally important. Suppose your post-operative management is not that great, then we will post-operative the blood will go for failure. That's how. That's why we are going to discuss all our speakers are going to discuss various modalities of dysfunctional blood prevention and management. And of course, the trabeculectomy indications, mainly it's based on the magnitude duration of the pressure, intraocular pressure, and the extent and progression of the visual field, and of course the optic nerve exchanges, and also the course of the contralateral eye. Suppose something wrong with the contralateral eye surgery, or patient develop any complications like marine glaucoma, shallow chamber, hypotensive maculopathy, then the chance of developing this eye also is very, very high. So you take adequate precautions to prevent all these complications. That, of course, the general health and life expectancy of the patient. These are the various indications for trabeculectomy. That's all of I did not repeat this one. And of course, there are certain relative contraindications like active inflammation, uveitic glaucoma, or active neovascular lesion, and extensive conjunctival scarring, where there is a multiple failed filter, where you are not able to get movable conjunctiva, then also you will not be able to be able to this thing. So the success of this anti-glaucoma, especially the trabeculectomy, depends on a thorough preoperative evaluation and uneventful surgical procedure and a proper postoperative management. So what are the preoperative considerations which we have to take into account is the patient demographic, especially the age of the patient. The age also matters. Younger individuals are more prone to have failure than the older individuals, and also type of glaucoma. There is a primary glaucoma, secondary glaucoma like uveitic, neovascular, traumatic, post-surgical, so many post-PKP. All these things have much more, the success rate is much more less when compared to primary glaucoma. And also associated systemic morbidity, and all these things will come to it later. And of course, the history of previous any anti-glaucoma or intraocular surgery or laser procedure, and of course in the other eye. One of the important things, the preoperative consultation when you plan to do a trabeculectomy in a patient is a good counseling is very, very important. And always better not to give false hope to the patient, because this is not patient. For them, they are very, very difficult to understand about the disease proper, the glaucoma. They think every surgery is a cataract surgery. But as a surgeon, we should not give them any false hope. So, and also the surgery, whatever we do is just to reduce the pressure, not to improve the sight. And also because another thing is we have to discuss a little bit about the risk and benefit about the surgical procedure, and also about the surgery and possible complications. We need not tell all the complications, but what are the possible complications and what to expect. Because most of the patients who they see, they will have an unrealistic expectation. Suppose they underwent a factor triple with multifocal or aspheric lens, their expectations, they spend more money, their expectation also will be very high. So we should be very, very thorough to the patient. And also need for repeat surgery, and also need for further future anti-glaucoma medicine after surgery sometimes. So that also we have to talk to them in detail. So coming to this one of the important things what we have observed in these long years, this role of anti-glaucoma medications. So those who are on long-term anti-glaucoma medications, especially prostaglandins or alpha-ganides, especially with the preservative, BAK, benzoyl sodium chloride, what we call is the activated conjunctiva. Suppose we know the virgin conjunctiva, what is not touched by anything else. No infection, not exposed to any drugs, not exposed to any surgery is virgin conjunctiva. But here, activated conjunctiva, even if you put the drop for a month or something like that, the whole conjunctival cytology will be changed. So when you do surgery in the activated conjunctiva, then it's, the conjunctiva will behave differently and the chance of failure is very, very high. And now, of course, the preservative-free drops are also available. But there is, even though it's very much useful when compared to preservative PEK drops, the results are not that encouraging, but to some extent it's very, very useful. Yeah. So what are the effect of anti-glaucoma medication on the eye is because these are all various cytological changes that happen in the conjunctiva, that is reduction in the gallbladder, especially with the not IgM proper, because of the BAK and other preservatives, increase in the fibroblasts and the conjunctival hyperemia, increased risk of bleeding, and of course with prostaglandin and other drugs, there will be some amount of subclinical breakdown of the blood-face barrier, increased intraocular inflammation and scarring and blood failure. So BAK, of course, it's notorious to produce inflammatory changes in the subepithelial conjunctiva, and there is inflammatory infiltrates the corneal epithelium, and there is a cellular swelling with the desquamation of the corneal epithelium. And also it has been proved that it is toxic to the trabecular meshwork and causes trabecular meshwork edema and reduce the cell number and compromise the functioning of the normal trabecular meshwork. And another important thing is it produces a careful abnormalities. There is especially reduced breakup time, and also OSD is a very big topic. It includes the dry eye, lid disease, conjunctivitis, etc. All these things are because of the BAK. And of course, to eliminate all these deleterious effects of this BAK and anti-glaucoma medication, preoperative steroids, which we used for quite a long time, more than 2 decades, we are using all cases. Those who are on long-term medication, we use either fluoromethanol, because indomethacin is not available. Previously, it was available in our country, now it's not available. But usually we use fluoromethanol. Sometimes if it is more severe, we used to give dexamethasone topical at least 4 times daily for 1 week prior to the surgery. And of course, in cases with inflammatory glaucoma and acute congestive glaucoma, sometimes we may go for, in addition to topical, we have to go for steroids also. And of course, these other things which we have to take into thing is the, suppose the patient is on any blood thinners, antiplatelets like aspirin or clopidogrel and other things, it's better to stop with the consultation from the treating cardiologist or general physician, because those who are on this blood thinners, antiplatelet, the bleeding, especially from the conjunctival vessels, not only conjunctival vessels and the iris during iodectomy is very, sometimes very severe, very difficult to manage. And of course, we have to control the systemic hypertension and diabetes. And suppose if the patient had any lid infection like blepharitis, better to treat them preoperatively with topical as well as the oral tetracycline. And the role of preoperative antibiotics, it's controversial, but we normally use it for about 2 days preoperatively. But this is very important. The cleaning with the povidone iodine is very important. This gives a very infection. And of course, the type of anesthesia, the conjunctive, you have to check for the conjunctival mobility, and you have to look into the site of surgery also perioperatively where we can do it. Then of course, selection and dosing of the antibiotic depending upon the patient and the type of glaucoma, etc. Of course, anesthesia is very important. An ideal anesthesia should the patient as well as the surgeon should be comfortable. There should not be any pain, no movement, or all these things. And of course, there are so much of anesthetic agents are available nowadays with retrobulbar, peribulbar. But normally we prefer subconjunctival infiltration, topical with infiltration with intracameral. It's a combination of all these things, or subtenons, either anterior or posterior subtenons we can give so that they will be comfortable during surgery. So these are some of the important preoperative considerations when you are planning to do a trabeculectomy, because this is very important to convince the patient and also to have a better result after trabeculectomy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, RK sir, for an excellent, elaborative, enlightening lecture on pre-op workup. Now I would like to request our next speaker, Dr. Sarmila. She is going to speak on how to diagnose failing BLEB and role of ASOC to recognize it early stage. So Dr. Sarmila is a senior consultant at Aravind Eye Hospital, Madurai. She is a member of Secretary of Institution Review Board of Aravind Eye Hospital. Dr. Sarmila has actively involved in the clinical research trials and published several papers in national and international journals. She has quite pioneer work in the nanophthalmus, and she has won the Best Paper Award in 2009 and Glaucoma Society of India. She has won the Best Paper Award in ICGS meeting in Singapore 2014. Apart from Dr. Sarmila is an excellent surgeon, and he is a good friend of mine. So welcome, Dr. Sarmila, madam. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Dev, for this kind introduction. I'm really happy to be a part of this very great instruction course where all my colleagues and mentors like RK sir are there. Thank you very much. And so the topic given to me is how to diagnose a failing bleb and the role of ASOCT to recognize it at an early stage. We all know how to diagnose a failing bleb. Most importantly, it is a clinical examination. That is a clinical way of evaluating a failing bleb. That's what we've been traditionally doing. That is based on intraocular pressure and also on the appearance of the bleb. So appearance of the bleb is usually done with the help of a slit lamp using a lot of bleb grading scales. However, this method is subjective and it does not give an exact quantitative assessment of the bleb function. So in order to get a quantitative assessment, we may have to go for imaging modalities like an anterior segment OCT or a UBM. So with the clinical evaluation, we have to diagnose a failing bleb. It means that the patient will have a high intraocular pressure, the bleb may be low or flat, there may be a vascularization over the bleb and also absent microcyst. Similarly, a good functioning bleb will have a lot of microcyst, a diffuse bleb, and very little vascularity. And also, we may have to diagnose it at an earlier stage or at a later stage. This is clinically based only on the time of presentation. For example, early bleb failures are usually seen within a month, whereas late bleb failures usually occur after a month. And other reasons to identify whether it is an early or a late failure depends upon the reason for the failure. That is, whether there is an obstruction at the ostium, it is because of the tight sutures or incomplete perforation of the Descemet's membrane, then that has to be an early failure and we can address it at an earlier stage. Whereas a subconjunctival or episcleral fibrosis, that becomes kind of like, it will start off early, but it may be there for a longer time and this will need a lot of intervention. So going on to the bleb morphology assessment, we have a lot of scales like the Wurzburg scale, which is based on the vascularity of the vessels, the corkscrew vessels, presence of encapsulation in the bleb, presence of microcyst. And then there is a Midgall and Hitching classification, which is again has 4 different types of blebs depending upon the intraocular pressure and the appearance of the bleb. It can be either a type 1 bleb, type 2 bleb, which is a good ideal bleb. That is, the bleb is thin, diffuse, and there is microcyst and good filtration is seen. And a type 3 bleb is where there is a very high intraocular pressure and you can see here that there is a lot of vascularity, and the type 4 bleb is a localized encapsulated bleb. So all these are some of the signs and classification of the bleb morphology. And then what we use commonly is the Murphy's bleb grading scale or the Indiana bleb grading scale, which is the 2 commonly used ones in the clinical practice. So how this is graded is based on the area of the bleb. That is the maximum area of filtration, both horizontally and vertically. And it also takes into consideration the height of the bleb and the vascularity. So what these scales do is, it is like you have to compare your bleb, what you see on the patient with this picture, and then you will have to grade it accordingly. Similarly, the Indiana bleb grading scale is also the same as the Moorfield bleb grading scale, except that it has an additional one other parameter, which is based on the leak of the bleb. That is, the Siedel's test is also included in this. So that is the basic difference. However, with all these bleb grading scales, we may not really get attention on the early signs of bleb failure. So that is the need for an anterior segment OCT. We all know that anterior segment OCT is a non-contact, non-invasive imaging technology where it provides a good cross-sectional high-definition images in a 3-dimensional view, and it is based on the principle of interference. However, with the conventional, the posterior segment OCT, they use a diode light of 18 nanometer, whereas with the anterior segment, we use a 1310 nanometer wavelength light. And for those who are going for one-time investment, there is a module which is coming with the ASOCT also. That is, the posterior segment and anterior segment can be used in the same machine. And what is the role of ASOCT in imaging the blebs? Of course, it is a very good indicator of bleb function. It also predicts the bleb-related complication. It is helpful in identifying the blebs failing in a very earlier stage. It also demonstrates the level of failure. That is, where exactly is the reason for the failure. Like there is an ostial closure, a flap fibrosis, or episcleral fibrosis. So this is very important in guiding the clinician on the intervention, that is whether to do a needling, a suturolysis, or a 5-FU injection. So all these are very easily picked up at an earlier stage, and it helps in restoring the blood function postoperatively. It is also very useful to find out the presence of an intrascleral leak in a non-penetrating deep sclerectomy surgery, and also to identify the tube position in implant surgeries. So what are the parameters measured by the ASOCT? We have the qualitative parameter, which is based on the bleb wall reflectivity, and also the quantitative parameters like the bleb height, the bleb wall thickness, the scleral flap thickness, the subconjunctival fluid space, and also the internal dimensions of the bleb. In an ASOCT, in order to understand a good functioning bleb, we may have to look at these things. That is, the presence of a multiform reflectivity, a diffuse pattern of the bleb, and a progressive increase in bleb height on the review. A successful bleb is usually characterized by a good internal fluid-filled cavity with a wide hyporeflective area, thicker wall, and a large number of microcysts. So first thing is the reflectivity. This is basically the qualitative measurement. So uniform reflectivity and multiform reflectivity. So for good functioning bleb, we may have to see if there are multiform reflectivity. So if you see this picture, the one on the top is the uniform reflectivity, where you see just one small space here, and then you see that the conjunctival wall is very thick. So which means that it is really not functioning so well. Whereas in the picture down, you see that there are multiple small spaces here and the conjunctival wall is thin. So this is some important information on the functioning of the bleb. So this is another picture showing the multiform reflectivity where you see multiple layers of microcysts with a thin conjunctival wall. And the other parameters are the bleb wall thickness. So how is this bleb wall thickness measured? Is basically the conjunctival, the distance between the first reflective signal from the conjunctiva to the top of the subconjunctival fluid space. So this is what is giving the bleb wall thickness. And then we have pattern of the bleb. Even based on the pattern, you can classify it as diffuse, a cystic bleb, or a non-functioning bleb. So diffuse blebs are the functioning blebs. Basically, you see a lot of multiple subconjunctival signal void areas corresponding to the fluid pockets. And this shows that it has a moderate intrableb reflectivity and it is a diffuse filtering bleb. Whereas a cystic bleb, you see one large area of a cystic space with a hyperreflective area, which is multiloculated. And then this is covered by a thin layer of conjunctiva. So this is a cystic bleb. And this is an example of a non-functioning or an encapsulated bleb where you really don't see any fluid space, but it is just a high intrableb reflectivity. So these are more in favor of a Tingnon cyst. So what are the benefits of doing an ASOCT imaging? One is to understand the surgical outcomes of trabeculectomy and also to understand or recognize the area of fibrosis at an earlier stage. It's very important to plan for the intervention and also to have an objective visualization of reversal of bleb function after any intervention. So this is something which is really very nice to see, because with the clinical way of assessment, we really do not appreciate the difference after the intervention. Either it could be a bleb needling or it could be a needling. So it's very useful to visualize the changes that happen after treatment. So here's one patient who I would like to share. This is a patient who is a 46-year-old lady with a diagnosis of primary angle closure glaucoma. She was on 3 anti-glaucoma medications. Her intraocular pressure was 32 with a very advanced disc, and she had a very advanced field loss as well. She underwent a trabeculectomy with mitomycin C in her right eye. 6 weeks post-op, intraocular pressure was 36, and then she had a Tingnon cyst, which is as seen here. An ASOCT was done to confirm and objectively document the changes. And then we plan to do a needling of the cyst, and a post-procedure ASOCT was also taken. So this is what I was mentioning. It is very, very nice to see that the pre and post pictures of ASOCT after the needling. So this is a picture which shows a large dome-shaped cyst, and you can see the ASOCT picture here. So after the needling, you can see that total reversal of the cyst. And we also, this is one other use of this. We also have ASOCT or an OCT guided overlay on this microscope. So this is a video which I've taken from my friend, Dr. Jayant, who is in SNEC. So they have used this. See, if you see, there is total fibrosis to begin with. So in their needling procedures, they usually use AC maintainer. It's also very important to use this because sudden gush of fluid can cause a hypotony. So some people usually practice to do this AC maintainer. So you see that it is a very fibrous bleb and very thin conjunctiva. I'm not able to see my slides.
Can we have 1 more minute, audiovisual team, please?
Just 10, 20 seconds, I think that should be fine.
Yeah, ma'am, the slide has gone off because you're more than out of time.
Okay. I'm sorry about that.
If you can come to the concluding slide, it will be great, ma'am.
Yeah, that is the concluding slide actually. Can I share it again?
Yeah, you can share screen again. Yeah, you can share screen again.
Yeah. So it is also very useful to see this objective transformation of the change in the bleb function, which happens over immediately. So because of want of time, I'm just skipping this. So then, but limitations of ASOCT is that it is expensive and it does not pick up microscopic structures or changes which happen earlier, and that can be seen only with a laser confocal microscope. So the take-home message here would be the macroscopic and microscopic features of conjunctival blebs are predictors of surgical outcomes. A good clinical evaluation is definitely the gold standard, but however, it is very subjective. ASOCT helps in objectively differentiating the functioning from a non-functioning bleb. It recognizes the signs of filtration failure earlier, and it is very crucial for timely management. Combined diagnostic approach of clinical examination augmented by ASOCT must be a part of post-operative assessment of bleb function. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarma Madam. It's a excellent talk. It's very informative and pictorial presentation. Really is a lot of things to learn from your talk.
Thank you.
And now I would like to request Dr. Mohiuddin Abdul Qadir. He's the chief of the glaucoma services, Arvind Eye Hospital, Tirunelveli. He has the basic training done under Dr. R. Ramakrishnan. He is one of my colleagues and mentor. He has done the observation fellowship from Johns Hopkins University, and he has underwent training at Moorfield Eye Hospital. And he is closely associated with Dr. Adam Robin and Dr. Pradeep Ramlu at Johns Hopkins University, Baltimore. He has an area of his interest is genetic research and large pedigree in primary open-angle glaucoma. He has published various peer-reviewed papers, and he is a par excellent surgeon. He is a very, very meticulous surgeon and has a great depth of knowledge in surgical management of glaucoma. So I welcome Dr. Mohiuddin sir, and he is speaking on early intervention, ocular massage, sociolysis, injection 5-FU or MMC, when and how many, and its outcome. Over to you, Dr. Mohiuddin, sir.
Devendra, not able to share my screen. Can I come later after you?
Yeah. Can you just try once more?
The bottom of your screen, there is a green share screen button.
Green share, just green share.
Yeah.
On Zoom.
Where are you, sir? Modi sir, share screen. Modi sir. Audiovisual team, can you help him, please?
Sir, on Zoom, bottom of your screen, there is a green button, share screen.
கீழே ஷேர் ஸ்கிரீன் இருக்கு, நீங்க டெஸ்க்டாப்ல வச்சுட்டு
Sir, if the systems are not running, why don't you shut your presentation and do it once again, sir? Yes, sir. Now we can see that.
Oh, Devendra.
Are you able to do it, or should I go ahead with my presentation?
I can see my slide.
Okay, try once more, sir.
Devendra, you go ahead. Mohit can personally after you.
Okay, sir.
You're better with time.
Okay. Maybe I want this one. No? Okay. Is my screen is visible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, yeah.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. So good evening, everybody. Today I'm going to talk about the various surgical technique of bleb needling with injection mitomycin C. So as my previous speaker talked about the pre-op workup, how the pre-op workup and the post-operative management is equally important, equally management for the successful trabeculectomy. But anyway, anyhow, after doing our best effort of the trabeculectomy, somehow some patients really they need the further need of the surgical intervention. So when all our efforts to survive bleb is fail, ultimately we need the surgical intervention. This is called the bleb needling. So aim of our bleb needling to bleb revision to re-establish the fistula from the anterior chamber to the subconjunctival bleb, where the aqueous humor may be reabsorbed. So how to recognizing failing bleb? I think it nicely described by the Dr. Sharmila. So we see the less diffuse bleb, vascular and flat and opalescent. So what is the exact cause of the trabeculectomy failure? Is subconjunctival fibrosis and subterranean encapsulation. So we come to know where is the bleb is going to fail, either at the level of the bleb capsule. So there is a fusion of the episclera or subterranean tissue at the subconjunctival episcleral area. Sometimes we get the grave membrane here. And second side, most common side is skull flap, either fusion of the skull flap to the underlying sclera, and sometimes the closure of the ostium. Ostium may be closed by the fibrin, by the pigment epithelium, sometimes vitreous, sometimes cortex, and sometimes the Descemet fold also. So now come to know when to do needling, when to do the bleb needling. When the various like the distal massage, suturolysis, and aquasuppressant, and the antimetabolite injection FU or 5-FU, all are failed to revive the bleb, then the surgical intervention needling is the next step to maintain the functioning bleb. So what are the indication of the bleb? When episcleral scarring are responsive to conservative management and excessive scarring or encapsulation of bleb, or there is an elevated IOP with deep anterior chamber. In this condition, we need to do the bleb needling. So these are the when to do the bleb needling after the surgery. So initial reports have suggested the short interval between the initial surgery and needling associated with good success. And needling revision performed less than 4 months from the time of trabeculectomy associated with greater success than those performed later. However, the fewer controversial literature is available. Some of the authors have presented good outcome in the late post-operative bleb needling. But in our hand, really late post-operative bleb needling is not working well. So I think what works in a hand, we should do it. So what is the prerequisite for bleb needling? First of all, check the internal ostium with gonioscopy, and there should be some amount of the bleb elevation should be there. And before the bleb needling, we have to check the conjunctival mobility, where is conjunctival mobile around the bleb area, and patients should not be on anticoagulant. Then coming to the bleb needling, the counseling is play a very important role, because again, this is the re-surgery. Again, we are going to do the patient taking the OR or in either an OPD. So we have to talk about the patient risk and benefit of the procedure. Even after doing the bleb needling, probably he may need the further surgery and he need the further medical treatment. So good informed consent and reassurance to the patient is the key of the before the procedure. Then what the knife you want to use, whatever you want, whatever works in your hand, you can do it. Most commonly used 26 gauge needle, 30 gauge needle, MBR knife. These are the history of the bleb needling. Over the last 30 years, multiple publications have reported needling is a part of the armamentarium of the post-filtering surgery. And these are the study done by the Mardley et al. In 1996. He showed the good success of bleb needling with injection MMC. And what we used all bleb needling with the use of injection MMC and 0.1 ml and 0.04 ml milligram per ml. These are the various anti-metabolite has been used. MMC, 5-FU, Avastin, and Lucentis. But these Avastin and Lucentis didn't show much encouraging outcome. Especially nowadays, MMC, most of the surgeons are using the MMC injections. So the studies have shown the MMC and 5-FU have the good outcome in the bleb needling. And recent report in 2016, we et al. Showed the needle revision with subconjunctival MMC injection were more effective than the subconjunctival 5-FU injection for bleb failure following the triple therapy. However, the recent literature compared by the Harvard University, they didn't find out any difference between the injection 5-FU and MMC. So technique of the bleb needling, either we can do in slit lamp or in an option theater, depend upon the surgeon choice. Always always in my option theater, and I always do in my bleb needling in the topical anesthesia. If you are not comfortable, you can do for the peripheral anesthesia. So provided iodine has to be applied before the procedure, and a application of the adrenaline swab may help to reduce the intraoperative bleeding. So this is the one of the case of the bleb needling, it's a post-phaco trouble. So before starting that bleb needling, just be injecting the injection 0.1 ml of the injection MMC plus 0.1 ml lignocaine. And this is a 26 gauge needle is bent around the 45 degree. After bending the 45 degree, this needle is introduced 4 to 5 millimeter away from the bleb, and slowly we have to move the needle inside, and we cut parallel, and we follow the contour of the globe. After cutting the subconjunctival fibrosed, we locate the skull flap and go under the skull flap and reach into the anterior chamber. Once you reach into the anterior chamber, you can see the softness of the globe. You can feel with your traction suture, and this is the end point of your bleb needling, and AC is formed. Okay, then this is successful bleb needling. And this is another case. This is the bleb needling that I'm doing in the phakic eyes. So in phakic eyes, we have to take the special precaution, as Dr. Sarmala has already shown this video. In this video, actually, after giving the injection MMC and lignocaine, just we do the ocular massage. After the ocular massage, we waited for 2 minutes. After waiting 2 minutes, take the clear corneal traction suture. So it helps in a maneuver of the bleb needling. Here the side port is made, and we use the AC maintainer. So AC maintainer is used to helpful throughout the procedure to maintaining the anterior chamber. So this maintaining anterior chamber is very crucial, especially in the phakic eyes. And this is a very thick walled bleb. So take the needle. I am going through the left hand side because I feel this side is more fibrosis, and I'm trying my hard to get out this thick bulb of the bleb, but I'm not able to pierce the exactly, and I'm not able to lock it. Where is my skull flap? So this you can see here white color thick bulb, actually the thick valve of the bleb. So after this, I'm here not able to get my skull flap. So after cutting the few strokes, I move into the another side. So I didn't find my flap. Then again I move here, and this is the here. Here is somewhere under the here is the flap. So I just move under the flap, and then the bleb is. I got my AC become a little shallow, and fluid egress from the anterior chamber, and successful bleb needling. So there's what's the advantage of bleb needling at slit lamp? This is a outpatient procedure. Okay, this is a very cost effective, no need to take into the OR. It's psychological advantage to the patient. Patient is afraid when you ask for the, go for the bleb needling, go for the second surgery, again they have to go to option theater. So most of the patients are afraid of again going to the option theater, and the little inconvenience, and has the less time consuming, because you finish, once you are expert in doing the bleb needling, you can do in slit lamp very easily. Within a 5 to 7 minutes you can finish whole the procedure. So this is a video of the bleb needling at slit lamp. So before doing the bleb needling, always use the anesthetic drop or anesthetic cotton tip applicator soaked in the topical anesthetic, applied for 2 minutes at the conjunctival side where you want to enter into the bleb. And again, this after the antibiotic drops, and you always use the providine iodine solution before the bleb needling. And this is again, the needle is passed 5 to 6 millimeter away from the bleb. In this technique, we should not do the conjunctival. We should not remove the conjunctival fibrosis first, because sometimes it is very difficult to get the removing the subconjunctival fibrosis. And this always we are tend to make the buttonhole, because we need the extreme cooperation from the patient. Patient has to look down, and most of the patient in the slit lamp, when we do the patient cooperation a little bit less in compared to the OR. Sorry. Just a, yeah. So in this technique, I used to first lift the flap. Once you lift the flap, so some amount of the aqueous egress from the anterior chamber into the subconjunctival space. So this fluid will going to help us to go for the further subconjunctival fibrosis removal, as is shown in this video. So now fluid is kept, and you can see then the globe becomes soft once this comes out. So this is another ab-internal bleb needling. This is a transcorneal needling at the slit lamp. This is developed by the Dr. Paul Baumberg. So what in this technique, what he used to do, make the 30 gauge needle bend in the jet-shaped manner, and this needle introduced into the ciliary cornea. Through the ciliary cornea, through the limbus, he is going under the flap. So this flap, and he is removing the subconjunctival fibrosis. Really, I don't have any personal experience by doing it, but somehow he's working with Dr. Paul Baumberg's hand, and really he published, recently he published one paper on this transcorneal needling. Then coming to needling after the tube surgery, especially when the Ahmed ball and Crippling ball, we have the encapsulated bleb. So in such scenario, we can try bleb needling in the Ahmed encapsulated ball. Then the repeat needling is a matter of controversy. Some surgeons don't want to repeat it again, but even the another set of surgeons, they say we can do separate incidents. We can do the 3-4 times. We can do the needling. But whenever we want to do the needling again, we have to keep in mind there should be initial improvement from the first needling. If the first needling is successful, or some of the amount of IOP control and the bleb morphology change, then only you should go for the second needling. So what is the risk factor for failed needling? It's a pre-op IOP more than 30 mmHg, or the trap with MMC, trabeculectomy without MMC, and this immediate post-operative IOP more than 10 mg, or sometimes if some surgeon feels needling done after the 4 months of trabeculectomy is most likely to fail. But again, this is a controversial issue, because right now lot of surgeons doing the late needling. So post-operative care, the slit lamp examination and tonometry as well as the sedal set should be performed 30 minutes after the procedures. And after the procedure, topical steroid antibiotics are prescribed for 4 to 6 weeks. There is some complication like hypema, hypotony, blebitis, kissing choroid, and endophthalmitis may occur. So just to conclude, bleb needling can rescue a failing bleb, save patient burden of using multiple anti-glaucoma medication, and repeat surgery. Bleb needling should be considered when bleb fails post-surgery. Needling does not affect the outcome of future surgery. In addition, needling may convert failed bleb into a more diffuse bleb, which reduces the risk of bleb leakage and late endophthalmitis. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, doctor, for your presentation. May I request you to please welcome the next speaker?
Dr. Moideen, sir, are you ready?
Yeah,
दो डिवाइस एक साथ चल रहे हैं यहाँ पे.
Hello.
Dr. Abdul, you need to mute one device of yours, or else you'll continuous echo.
Yes, sir. But I think you have to switch off from another side. You're using the two devices at the same place.
एक डिवाइस से लॉग आउट करिए आप.
Okay. Sorry, just
Like visible, sir.
yeah. So I'll be talking about, sorry for delay, I'll be talking about early intervention following glaucoma filtering surgery. I think basically everybody talked, the filter failed in 3 locations on the block of the internal ostium. Sometimes make a small ostium or tight still flap suture. The main culprit is the subcutaneous scarring, the motor cause of failure. So I think already Samilan told about type, I always call type 0 block because of multicystic and localized and pressure below teens. And the ideal block we only need block 1 diffuse, low block, elevated block, and posterior block. And the type 2, again, one is a high IOP, try to fail, and the surface contain engorged blood vessels and a lot of fibrosis. So this is an encapsulated block with the localized, highly elevated downshift and cyst-like cavity in the hypertrophic heat and capsule. The surface is engorged blood vessels. Mostly happens in 2 to 8 weeks following surgery. Something associated with gel formation. So the early sign of failure, sometimes the blood will be congested and diffuse along the sutures line, more vascularization, a thickened blood or more localized blood. The thing is, in the late sign is again the blood to vascularize and blood thickening will be increased. The large surface and deep vessels become apparent and reduction in the congenital microsis or persistent riser. The main risk factor for the failure of the glaucoma is higher among the patients using AGM. They're not stopping AGM doing surgery. They're not supplementing with topical steroid because surgery is high risk for failure. I already know taking pseudotaking near the glaucoma and MDH, unsuccessful surgeries and black rays to supposed to be some of the risk factors. So I'll be talking about mostly about digital massage and upper suture lysis, releasing the residual suture, IFP or metamestic injections. And I think they will also talk about needling and one of the recently seen in the European Glaucoma Society. You consider focal pressure in the case of poor filtration shortly after trachelectomy because it's very important. If you want a good, successful later block, it's supposed to need a good block in the initial postoperative period. And this is the one is always better to check the pressure on day 1. Maybe people you don't do. I normally check in a green light. I don't need the fluorescent. I get a roughly around the pressure is 10, 15, or 20. So you can able to feel pressure more than 20. You can do something massage like this to elevate the blood. And try to don't be scared of taking a pressure, giving a massage in immediate postoperative period. If you cannot check the pressure and do it, and look for the blood to form immediately after your massage. And this is one digital massage. I will give you increasing fluid separation between a flap and subcutaneous tissue. I can do it nearly postoperative period. You can just press it here, then the surgeon does the filtration, and massage it here. You see a blood is elevating. The ideal thing to do before ALS. Before doing suture lysis, you can know how much fluid is coming out from your massage. If the fluid is coming out very early and with minimal massage, you can delay ALS. If it's coming a lot of force, and you can better do suture lysis. What is recently I just gone through this study, this can early postoperative intraocular pressure predict the success following vitamin C in abdominal trabeculectomy, especially in angle glaucoma. And the purpose to evaluate association between early and postoperative IOP and determine the early and postoperative to predict the surgical outcome. And what the outcome prediction is the IOP in the day 1 is more than 10.5 and IOP in the day 7 is more than 13.5. The relative risk of failure was around 4.2. 90% confidence over 1.2 to 14.8. The cutoff value was 13.5 meter day 7, achieved accuracy of 80% and predicting success of IOP less than 15. At the same time, the 57% predicting failure, less more than 15 with the medication after surgery, respectively. So what the conclusion of the study is, in the control of early IOP at 13.5 or less, provide a better outcome. So immediate intervention of the surgery has a considerable role in maintaining filtration and change the probability of success following trabeculectomy. And this is one more tips of glaucoma for European Glaucoma Society. The blood infiltration of trabeculectomy can be successfully treated by using acute suppression rather than needling for the short period of time. Okay, so they basically for digital for less period you can do intensive steroids. Don't worry about giving steroids. We have to give more steroids at least for 3 months. If you treat trabeculectomy, if you failure, you can also increase up to 6 months once a day. So acute suppression better to start at day 10 if you feel like there's going to be some tendencies. Teach patients to give a massage from the downside, and you can see the blood elevating there. You do a steady fingertip. You can do 100 degree away from the blood. Ideally, we say 4 times a day at 10-second interval, and reassess every visit. And it's ideal for doing before needling. If the patient know how to do massage, even after needling, this will be very useful to have a successful needling. And if there is any hyphema, ACCL, try to avoid doing digital massage. And this is the video. Sorry, it's not coming and not playing. Whether it's I was trying to see in my Mac. So to just give a pressure from here, other patient look up and give a 10 pressure 4 times a day. A good thing for the filtration. And the laser suture lysis relatively is effective. You can avoid early blood failure. You can extra measure to control your operations. You can selectively laser subcutaneous sutures allows the postoperative titers of intraocular pressure, basically increasing the outflow. When to do it? Ideally around 7 to 14 days following glaucoma filtration surgery. If you're using mitomycin C, you can do more than 14 days. And the two lenses, basically lens is Hoskinian, the one ideally normally we use, and it has a button on the back side. That has launches the connecting vessels. You can focus the suture, you can fix the globe. Easier for you to control, and you can cut the sutures. And normally the laser normally uses frequency double Nd:YAG green laser 532 nanometers. You can use the topical anesthesia. And then again the suture lysis. My video is not working. Sorry. You just have to cut the suture and give a massage. See for the spontaneous block formation, not forming, give a pressure from downside to form the block. And the power is around 300 to 800 milliwatts and around 550 to 50 micron spot size, 0.2 second millisecond durations, and never cut more than one suture. This is a diagram done by my one of my colleague at Vasu, and excellent diagrammatic one. We cut the laser, you see the suture lies. Don't cut more than one suture, and the complication can be congenital bottom tubes, epidomy, shallow chamber, detachment, made from osteal hyphema. And the releasing suture is effective as a suture lysis. The timing of release is the same as the suture lysis. It's very useful for thick tenons. You feel like somebody in a pre-operative, during the intraoperative, you feel very thick tenons, and that is very difficult to do a suture lysis. Better to put 2-3 release sutures. And also the lasers are not available. You very clear of the center. The laser is not available. This is really helpful to achieve a success in your surgery. So again, the video, sorry, it's not working. I just showed how to release the releasable suture. And the agents is normally to minimize the postoperative fibrosis. We use the longest acting steroids. Don't use Velpred, Lotipred, don't use chloromethadone, don't get scared of using a steroid. During trabeculectomy, you use the dexamethasone, the longer acting steroids to have better success, more frequent and longer time, and can be used in pre-operative. What our was saying, better to use pre-operative, somebody using more than 3 drugs and using a trabeculectomy. And what 5FU, what antimalarial is supposed to use is 5FU and mitomycin C. And 5FU, is an proven method with fibroresistance, it inhibits fibroprotrusion. Basically, take 0.1 cc, 5 milligram, do next to the blood, don't worry, don't give it away from blood. Now, if you go 100 degree away from the blood, now you're giving next to the blood, 8 millimeter from the limbus, you clinically, based on the clinical response. The main problem with the 5FU injection is the large epithelial effect. So, no, don't allow the 5FU to leak from your wound. Better to massage after your injections. And mitomycin C, it is 100 times better than 5FU. The more of an endothelial toxicity, and concentration is 0.2 to 0.5 milligrams, and it inhibit DNA synthesis. So basically, what Devendra told is we use 0.2 milligram for mitomycin C. Then we have to take 1.15 cc of mitomycin C. We mix it to 0.12 Xylocaine, and we take 0.03 in total, and this way. And I think this way we inject 8 millimeters from limbus and try to massage this area, and so that they can the mitomycin don't go to limbus. The blood bleeding, I think Devendra told you the 3 things. One thing is subconjunctival, subscleral, and entering the antechamber. So three methods is important. So if you one more tips is if you want to do a blood needling in the injection during slit lamp, you can bend the needle like this with a needle cap, so that you get an angulation like this, you can easily inject. So take home point is check the IOP in day 1, roughly around 10 millimeter. Day 7, less than 31 millimeter. I think good filtration in the early post-operative period of the capsulectomy is associated with long-term success. Thank you. So we don't want a blood to be around 20. We don't want a blood to be 6. We better have blood to be around 10. Possibly diffuse blood. Then I will want to be able for it. Thank you.
Thank you, doctor, for your presentation.
Yeah.
May I request the doctor to please invite another speaker?
Let's stop sharing, sir. Thank you, Moideen sir, for excellent lecture. It's very informative. Now I would like to request Dr. Ganesh sir. Yeah. Dr. Ganesh Raman, he is the Chief Consultant at Glaucoma Services, Aravind Eye Hospital. He is the head of the department there. He is a high volume cataract and glaucoma surgeon. He has extensive experience in glaucoma and cataract procedure, including the patchless glaucoma valve, GAT, canaloplasty, and device-assisted trabeculotomy. He is a visiting consultant for LICO for various hospitals in India and abroad. He has numerous paper and poster presentations in various state, national, and international conference. He has won the Young Ophthalmologist Travel Grant Award at WGC Vancouver in 2013. And he is my senior at my PG, when I was doing my PG at Indore, and my good friend. Welcome to you, Ganesh sir. He is speaking on needling in post-Ologen cases and repeat post-reb need extra care. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Devendra. Thanks for inviting me, and thank AIOS and our mentor, Dr. R.K. sir, Moideen sir, and my colleagues, Dr. Sharmila, Dr. Devendra, and Dr. Ravindra also for being here. This IC, thank you for inviting me also. I was speaking to you on bleb needling and Ologen. Ologen, as you all know, nobody has covered this, so I'll just speak a little bit about it. It's an anti-scarring agent without chemical inhibition, unlike MMC. And it results in a prominent filtering bleb with successful surgical outcome, biocompatible and biodegradable, and ready for use packaging. It comes ready, and this is how you use it. You apply the Ologen after you have fashioned the scleral flap and you've made the ostium, and then you've sutured it. And then over the scleral flap, you apply it, and then you close the conjunctiva over the Ologen. So the idea is that slow leakage of aqueous will get absorbed into the Ologen, and the fibroblasts which migrate into the bleb area in response to the aqueous coming out will have a sort of a regular appearance rather than a random fibrotic manner. And a nice article by Arun Narayanasamy in 2013 in which they compared the efficacy safety of collagen matrix in phacotrap and with mitomycin C at 1 year. They found that Ologen needed 39% of them needed bleb needling with 5FU compared to mitomycin C blebs. So you can see that after keeping Ologen, actually your work starts becoming more and more harder, although the safety profile is far better than mitomycin C. So this is a video which will show you how to go about doing the Ologen. So this is a phakic eye, as you can see. And as we have been all the mentors are common. So you find that even I am placing the AC maintainer. And once the AC maintainer is in place, it's really tough to get past the Ologen. It's very tough. You can even make a small buttonhole. Fortunately, the Tenon's is so good that it overrides the conjunctiva and Tenon's overrides, and then you can sort of make sure that the openings are not over one another. So that helps you. But the idea is that you have to make a opening, clean the opening from the episcleral tissue and the Ologen, and also the subconjunctive tissue and the Ologen, and enter the antechamber so that more and more fluid comes out and from the eye, and you have a good, nice diffuse bleb. The idea is to tackle it from both sides. You go from, if you're a right-handed person, you go from now you can see that the antechamber is entered, and as soon as you, there's a little bit of decompression, you'll find that blood regurgitates into the antechamber. You can find a streak of blood going in there as you come out, because from the episcleral tissue, blood will enter the antechamber. And you can have the AC maintainer on to get the nice diffuse bleb formation. So that becomes your end point. And if you want, you can approach it from the other side also, that is your left-hand side. And a very important trick is that you must not give mitomycin C in these eyes. So no 5-fluorouracil or no mitomycin C, because they tend to absorb and they may cause scleral necrosis deep down. And you may even have a perforation of the conjunctiva, and you can have the severe hypotony. So avoid mitomycin C injection before when you're using blood needling for Ologen. And this is the endpoint. The other issue is that you can always give injection dexamethasone. So you can give dexamethasone and then increase the steroid post-operatively, as Dr. Mohiuddin has already mentioned. Coming to repeat trabectomy, and this is a nice article which from the Shankar Nethralaya group, the outcomes of repeat trabectomy mitomycin C with either TRAB alone or with combined with phacoemulsification. They reported a good success of, you can see that the qualified success is 89% in TRAB and 79% phaco-TRAB, and that is for the IOP less than 21 millimeters of mercury. And for IOP less than 17 millimeters of mercury, it is 77 and 71, and IOP even lower, that is 14 millimeters of mercury, you have good qualified success. Complete success not so good in very low IOP. So repeat TRAB has its own issues. And the cause of failure in that article mentioned that it's a duration of surgery. If it's been done less than 4 years after the primary TRAB, then you can have a problem. Success not so good. Secondary glaucomas, mainly because you don't have much space or the antechamber is so distorted that you may not have a very good ostium. Younger age and phaco-TRAB and Fornix-based flap. These three conditions are not very conducive to very low intraocular pressure. So less than 14 millimeters mercury, you may not get such low pressures if you were to do a repeat TRAB in such conditions. And Dr. Sharmila, who is here with us, she has also published in 2019 a very nice article on the surgical outcomes of repeat TRAB augmented with high-dose mitomycin C. So both these papers used high-dose mitomycin C of about 0.4 milligram percentage, and they were at the discretion of the first paper was discretion of the authors if they want to use for 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and here the mitomycin C was used for, I think, two time slot, that is less than 3 minutes and more than 3 minutes. And they had a very good successful outcome. But the number of medications, if you were to see as the nature of the disease is, you were not able to reduce the medications too much, but the intraocular pressure did come down from 32 millimeters to about 16 millimeters at the end of 1 year. So these are quite rewarding procedures to be done instead of planning for a very major intervention, for example, something like an implant surgery. So RK sir has already mentioned how to plan for such eyes. So I'll just show you a small video that when you're planning a repeat trabectomy, always better to check whether the conjunctiva is mobile or not, because already one area has been scarred. You want to operate in a eye area which has a good mobile conjunctiva so that your bleb can form better. Successful outcome is brought about. And this is a video of repeat trabectomy. You can see that the trabectomy has been done correctly at 12 o'clock meridian. So either you can go to temporal side or you can go to the nasal side and then do the procedure. So superior rectus traction suture is being applied. You can also use a corneal traction suture. You have to find out whether the mitomycin C has been used prior or not. And if it has been used, it's better to avoid dissecting in that area. So you find that incision is being given just adjacent to the blood because you would like to have mitomycin C application at as much area as possible. But be very careful when you go close to the blood. If it's very diffuse or cystic, there is a very high chance of perforation. And the dissection also has to be as posterior as possible and remove all the tenons as much as possible. And episcleral tissue has to be dissected. We are going a little nasally in this situation. And once you have adequately dissected, it's better to place the cauterize gently and place the mitomycin C. And after placing the mitomycin C, copious wash is being done. And the flap technique is the same as what you would do. The main disadvantage is that you tend to have a smaller flap in these eyes. It's not your usual level of flap. You tend to have a smaller flap. And that is actually a disadvantage because many people, once the steps of the surgery are complete, then you can close a normal way. This is a once the flap sutures have been applied, this is a wing sutures which we apply. The important thing is that you have to take it over the cornea, because the blood will not hold on, because it's already been maybe treated by mitomycin C. It's very friable. So only the edge you can utilize, but the first episcleral bite, which we usually take, will go far ahead and try to bring forward the conjunctiva as much as possible. So you have a good closure. So 3 throws are applied. And once you have the 3 throws applied, you bring the conjunctiva as much forward as possible so that you don't see the peripheral iridotomy. So the conjunctiva will be almost watertight. There will be some amount of leak, but it will definitely be watertight. And then check for Seedles at the end of the procedure so that there is no leak. Once you have done the procedure, you have to release the suture post-operatively. This is a inferotemporal trap, which we used to do almost 15 years back, when we didn't have the RD implants for managing such situations. So this is a release of the releasable suture in a repeat trap. We were not able to do it superiorly, and you can see that these sort of procedures we used to do a long time back. And coming to the points to be considered, when you plan such a surgery, the difference between the primary trap and the retape trap, as much as possible, should be more than 4 years. If the first trap has not worked, then very less likely that the second trap will be working. The secondary glaucomas are very important, mainly because you have less conjunctival site for repeat procedure, and the antechamber can also be distorted, because if you are operating in for example, high PAS syndromes, high PAS sort of situations like Axenfeld or eye syndromes, you may not have space for doing a repeat procedure. Younger age, phonic space flap, as I mentioned, and phaco trap have high chance of success, less chance of success, and you cannot bring the IOP to very low teens. Mitomycin C has been published. Here we use 0.02 milligram for 4 minutes, rather than for use a higher concentration for 2 minutes or less duration of time. Thank you very much for patient listening.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Ganesh sir. It's an excellent talk. It's a very nice video. So now, I would like to request our next speaker, Dr. Ravindra. Dr. Ravindra is the head of Department of Glaucoma at Sankar Foundation. He has a vast experience in managing glaucoma and cataract. He has presented various paper and poster at national and international conferences, and he is a former Glaucoma India Education Program Coordinator for South Zone GSI. He conducted many CMEs at Vizag and near about Vizag area, Vizag and Hyderabad. And he is a very dynamic and innovative surgeon. And over to you, Dr. Ravindra sir. And he is speaking on ab interno bleb needling and its advantage, role of intraoperative gonio lens. Thank you, sir. Over to you.
Namaste, Devendra. Namaste, RK sir. Vanakkam, sir. Very nice to be seeing you and hearing your voice and all the tips. Hi, Ganesh. Hi, Sharmila. Dr. Majid, sir. I hope that this time will be usefully spent both ways. I found this a good topic. Once Dr. Devendra gave me this topic, I started doing the surgeries. And if we look at the potential benefits of needling and the risk factors and factors we have to look for success, and how we have to talk to the patient. The duration of the surgery is important, then vascularity is important, and height and number of needlings. Some of these factors are related inversely and some are related directly to the success. And the more the number of needlings, the more difficult the problem is for us. So we are always looking for ways and means of validating our techniques and looking for new techniques to help our patients. So once upon a time, we used to say trabeculectomy means end of the road in terms of conventional surgery, and then the tubes. but the needlings have really come in very handy for us. We learned from each other. And so we can avoid the repeat wraps and equation procedures and dialysis to a later date, if at all required. So we see the timing is important. The early failures are there and the late failures are there. And then depending on the location of the obstruction, the iris tissue or vitreous tissue, then ostium, whether it is open and whether the flap and edge are open or scarred, and the subconjunctival tissue and how the thickness is there, all these things are going to matter for overall success. Now, when we look at ab externo, we see that subconjunctival hemorrhage is a frequent occurrence, and probably this is one of the factors that leads us to difficult situations. And if we were to look at ab interno procedures, the subconjunctival hemorrhage is something that is less common and that may help us. And of course, we would have fear of suprachoroidal hemorrhages or endophthalmitis to be more with the ab interno procedure. But if judiciously selected and well done, I think we may have a better or balanced situation either way. So at every point, we have to manage the risks and benefits and state the things and then take the decisions. So one of the important things is grading and then the ostium open or not, and what type of opening it is, whether it is spouting or just tightly scarred and still open. And then we go through the cycle, digital massage, suture removal, and then needling, 5 few injections in between. And then ultimately, we have to take the decision regarding the ab interno needling. And the way I look at it, I have started looking at it, the less chance of bleeding may be the better thing about ab interno procedure. And instrumentation required, of course, is simple, but what I did was to bend a simple iris spatula slightly anteriorly so that the angle that we get is more likely to be succeeding in reaching our goal. Now, whether the viscoelastic aided procedure or bimanual procedure is working in our hands, we have to be aware of both. And once the procedure is over, we can see that I have fast forwarded it because I'm suspecting some time problem may come. See, the instrument is passing and going into the scleral area, subscleral area with ease or sometimes with difficulty. And then once we hydrate it, the flow comes out. So flow coming on the table may reduce subsequently and may need ultimately more further procedures. And how to go about these things. So the other technique under discussion, bimanual irrigation based technique. So this is the first incision, second incision with the help of a bent blade. And this is the bimanual technique, irrigation coming in from our phaco handpiece irrigation. And then when we hydrate at the end, we see flow and raised bleb. And what I am doing generally is that I am adding viscoelastic into a small area and then injecting 5-fluorouracil beyond it. This has been my technique and I think fairly successful. So post-operatively, this was the first day. The Digital massage on the slit lamp reduced the pressure further. And I posted the case for 2 more 5 fluorouracil injections, and then finally an IOP of 24 preoperatively in an end-stage difficult case ended up with 16 millimeters in the long run. Now, what about the alternatives? Are any better alternatives available? Would our procedure benefit from this wonderful gonioscopic use? Is it really required? Let us just have a few considerations on that. Surgical gonioscopes are available. Swan Jacob, Katina, one that we use, that internationally is used for glucose stent. But the problem with these is that we have to bend our microscope. These microscopes are not generally available with most of our colleagues. And then the patient's head also has to be bent to other side. And then once we see the view, we find it coming to the other side. The ostium is somewhere here and the view that is coming is here. So this is surely a difficult technique. We will have to bend our backs, and sometimes we may succeed. But if we were to lay our hands on this type of lens, an innovative design that has been described in this article, double prism based gonio lens, where the are not required, then we might be more comfortable. But of course, whether this is necessary or not is the first thing. I think the surface anatomy based landmarks are sufficient for us to succeed and remove the fear complex or psychological barrier and be more effective with this procedure. I think that is the last slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Ravindra sir. Very nice talk, and I think is one of the best PowerPoint I have seen. I think excellent PowerPoint. How do you make is excellent, and very innovative. Very innovative. The way you designed your spatula into that for internal blood needling. Actually, we already have some spatula, ready-made spatula coming from Epsilon. Yes, but your idea is innovative. Just bending the tip of the spatula and making it. It's very nice, sir. Excellent, sir. Thank you. Thank you. So I think we have 5 to 7 minutes. So this session over for, I think, discussion. So I would like to request RK sir comment on some talks.
Thank you, Devendra, and thank you, Ravindra, for a nice presentation. And also, I have to thank all the speakers for their wonderful, in short span of time, they have done a wonderful presentation. Of course, one of the important complications of trabeculectomy is the blood failure, the dysfunctional blood. So even though it's a very good procedure, but once you should, all the surgeons, those who are doing this type of surgery, they should know how to handle this failed blood, especially what has been discussed in the last 1.5 hours, because there's so much when to do massage, when to do suture lysis, and when to do blood needling. And blood needling itself, they have shown so much internal, external, Binton or something. And of course, the role of ASOCT. Really, it's the upcoming tool in the diagnosis of early blood failure, so that we can intervene early and prevent the blood going for permanent failure. So, few questions. One question to Devendra. When you do blood needling, how when from trabeculectomy, how much time you will wait when you will do blood needling?
So it depends upon the case to cases. I usually wait for the 2.5 months, minimum 3 months. After most of my building after the 8 weeks only. 8 weeks. So I tried we use mitomycin C in all of my cases. So up to 8 weeks, try all the measures, removing suture lysis, massage, then even the carbonic anhydrase inhibitor. Then if nothing works, then ultimately we go for the bleb needling.
So when you will give a mitomycin, how mitomycin will give before or after? What the precautions you have to take, because we are just separating the scleral flap from its bed. So chance of mitomycin entering joint is 10. So how you will take all the precautions?
So I think recent time, most of the surgeons right now using the injectable mitomycin C. I'm using injectable mitomycin C since 5 to 7 years. So before needling, before 2 to 3 minutes before only I used to inject mitomycin C. Only thing when we're injecting, just bend the needle at 45 degrees. So that when you're bending the needle, it's give you the chance just you enter into the subtenance area. Instead of going downward, we go little forward. So always inject mitomycin C 6 to 8 millimeter away from the bleb area, then slowly spread over the bleb, then again push back into the over the bleb area where you want your desired bleb is there, and you feel which area bleb is going to be occur. So just spread it, and I don't think so. Once we wait for 2 to 3 minutes, most of the time mitomycin will absorb, is less likely it go into the anterior chamber.
Okay. One question to Ganesh. Ganesh, you are there?
Sir, yes, sir.
Ganesh, you talked about the repeat filter also, no? Do you have any experience? Because I do most of my repeat filter in the same site. I will go through the same site, the failed first filter site. Do you have any, because I find it more...
yes, sir, that option can be tried, sir. I'm not doing it on a routine basis.
Okay.
But after your idea, maybe we should take that up first. We should revise that filter, the existing one. And then if that is not working, then we can extend, because if we open the eyes at multiple places, then it becomes a disadvantage. So I think we should take inputs from you that we should revise the pre-existing filter, and then we should, if that is not working, then we can plan for either a bleb needling, or we can do a repeat trap elsewhere. Many of the times we are not able to do that, mainly because the trap has been done elsewhere. So we don't know the architecture underneath the conjunctiva. Because of that, most of the repeat trap, even the literature which has been published, both from the Shankar Netralaya group and Dr. Sharmila's, they have many patients have been referred from elsewhere for trap.
Okay, good.
Now to add to that,
so you want to do a repeat trap? You want to go to limbal base, or you want to go to Fornix base?
Yeah, limbus base says the success is better with limbus base, but since we have been trained in Fornix base, we do the same way. But so far, which procedures which we have been doing, we have been using slightly more duration of mitomycin C rather than the concentration. Dr. Sharmila wanted to say something.
No, this is just the observation or the practice that we have changed here, because after the starting of the tubes, which we are doing at Arvind, so I think in the past 5 years, the number of repeat trabeculectomies have come down a lot. So it is the success with the tube is for the as a second procedure is definitely much better. So earlier, when we were not technically so well versed in doing the tube surgeries, we were trying to do a repeat trabeculectomy. And like what Ganesh has also told, and as our observation in the paper, the role of mitomycin C, where the surgery was done. So all these things also actually matter. We do not know whether the mitomycin C was used in the first surgery. So if there was, it was not used, then definitely using a mitomycin at a higher concentration and titrating the duration. If you're using a higher concentration like 0.4 milligram, we use it probably for 1 or 2 minutes. And if it is 0.2 milligram, which we are using, then we use it for a longer duration. Again, it is based on the case-to-case selection as well. But my observation, or what we have changed right now, is when a trap, when it fails, and now with the current success we are seeing with the tubes, we are going in for the tube surgery.
Just quick question. Do you, after ASOCT, do you change your mind? Are you doing bleb needling or not? Just quick answer.
No, actually, ASOCT is just to have an objective measurement of the bleb morphology and also to see the change over time. But clinical judgment, I would say, is definitely, that's what we've been doing for a longer time. And definitely it's like 70% you will be, it is as equal to that as ASOCT. But, but yes, because if it's an earlier intervention, maybe we should look at
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Finish off on time. Thank you all the speakers and respected teacher. Thank you all attendee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dev.
I think we have just time for one photograph. Do we?
Yeah.
So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all the doctors and all the speakers. Thank you so much for sharing your screen space out here and sharing the virtual platform. I'd like to thank Dr. Devendra Maheshwari. Thank you so much, Dr. Devendra.
Thank you. Thank you. It's nicely coordinated.